broadcast is live. Hello, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Manager here at criticalblast.com. And if you've watched any of these live streams, you also know that I write a few things. Currently writing, the Destroyer series starring Remo Williams and Master Chun. But I've also got some short stories and other anthologies, and one of them is this book here called Strange Imaginings, which takes some of the weird things that run around in my head and puts them down on paper, answering questions like, what if someone decided to become a superhero? What if aliens ran the mafia? What if stories grew on trees? So I'm going to sit here and read from this very short, what I'm told is a very creepy Christmas story. And I'm just going to do this until people start jumping into the open stream to pimp their stuff. So until then, I'm going to pimp my stuff. This is available on Amazon. It's a thin little volume, but we do have other books out there, so help yourself to them. The title of the story is Nicolas Cage. That's Nicholas with an apostrophe. What his exact sins were, Nicholas could no longer remember. That wasn't quite true, of course. Oh, he had a dim recollection of the generalities, murky little half-thoughts of greed and desire, and, of this he was fairly certain, of children. But it was those damnable details, those nagging, niggling specifics, that he was never quite able to put his finger on. A muted light emanated throughout the glacial walls of the hole that was his prison. Sunlight filtered through untold miles of gray-green frozen water, his only indication of the passing of days. He did not shiver in the cold anymore. Years of enduring this frozen hell had hardened his skin, now red and cracked in even his nethermost parts. Often he tried to will himself into death, but to no avail. The collective belief of others that he lived was infinitely stronger than his desire to die. Nicholas stretched and rose from the rugged wood plank that served for his bed. The plank lay across the full length of the cell's back wall, and was only slightly shorter than Nicholas was tall. Pulling a splinter from his scrawny buttocks, he shuffled naked toward the left-hand wall. The right-hand wall was smooth like the rear one. The third, however, displayed several short vertical gouges, grouped in collections of 5. In the earliest days of his imprisonment, decades ago, centuries, he couldn't know, Nicholas had pried out one of his own teeth, a split and yellowed canine, and used it to calendar his days by scoring it into the hardened ice until it left a mark. There were 365 such marks engraved in the counting wall since Nicholas' last penance. By his reckoning, it ought to have been again last night, but it hadn't been. He scratched his head and tried to think through the eternal fog. Sometimes he miscalculated, lost track of time, scratched a day twice, forgot to scratch at all. It must be tonight, he thought. Yes, definitely tonight. The ice-filtered illumination had begun to wane when Nicholas first became aware of their approach. The scuffling of their wooden boots echoed throughout the tunnels, soon muffled beneath the unintelligible squirrel-like chattering of their high-pitched gnome speak. They swarmed about the door of his cage, these ugly homunculi with thick, hairy hands. They had bulbous noses, very like potatoes, and their eyes were the merest pinpricks of blackness buried deeply beneath beetled brows. The stench of their hirsute bodies assaulted Nicholas' senses as they pointed and hopped and gibbered, while the tallest of them set about unlocking the door. Wearily, Nicholas exited his cage, stooping to avoid bumping his head against the ceiling of these passageways designed for bodies half his height. He did not try to escape. Not anymore. Gnome fingers, the nails thick and yellowed, poked and prodded his paunchy, sagging frame, herding him onward and upward through miles of burrows, twisting a tortuous maze through the ice caves until, at last, they were birthed anew under the stars at the top of the world. The howling wind blinded Nicholas with stinging snow and hail, and even his cold-hardened skin reacted to the frigid conditions. He bled in several places as the elements pelted him with hailstones. The gnomes thronged about him and presently brought him his penance raiment, the blood-red sackcloth that symbolized only a little his ancient misdeeds. By night's end, the fabric would be charred and sooty. Sackcloth and ashes, the only proper attire for atonement. Once garbed, the gnomes loaded him into an awaiting carriage, an overly ornate ruby and gold thing, harnessed incongruously to a pack of old bucks, their fur muddied and matted and patched with mange. The beasts pawed at the frozen ground, grunting and flatulent as Nicholas, hands trembling, took up the reins. The sea of gnomes about him abruptly hushed. Even the winds calmed in seeming anticipation, and in the ensuing eerie silence, Nicholas' single raspy word echoed as though from distant canyons. Ho! Straight away the world fell from beneath him. Nicholas went nauseous, reeling with vertigo. The air was suddenly thin. His face grew numb. He struggled for a full, satisfying breath. His stomach retched violently, desperate to disgorge itself of contents it no longer held. The long night had begun anew. Each atonement was longer than the one before. Always there were more of the wretched little urchins, the children to whom Nicholas was forced to make his reparations, and he cursed the copulative instinct that drove humanity to spew forth progeny in such abundance. Entering the homes through waste-choked chutes and soot-filled flues, he presented himself, shameful and filthy, at the bedside of each and every sleeping child. Cherubic young boys, hair tousled, pouting lips drooling on pillows, angelic little girls with rosy cheeks wrapped in layers of ribbon and lace. He stood by each of their sleeping forms, begging their forgiveness, silently sobbing. This was his punishment. Beg, but do not wake. Look, but don't touch. Every so often, errant memories would taunt him. Fir trees festooned with lights, twinkling stars penetrating the secrecy of snow-covered pines, sheltering brightly colored boxes, the crate is small, rectangular, and wooden. Sealed and wrapped, containing hidden delights. He sweats despite the cold as he hurriedly nails it shut and buries it with the telltale piece of tatting sticking out. And then it would be gone. He could no more secure the thoughts in his brain than he could pick up a bead of mercury with his fingertips. In every home was placed somewhere a list of each child's demands, stipulations in the child's own hand of what sacrifices were required of Nicholas for that year. He could never meet them all, could hardly fulfill any. Inevitably, he left each child with some feeble token of his penance, some flimsy gewgaw or gaudy trinket of gnomic handiwork. He was allowed to avail himself of whatever foods the children laid out for him, invariably some kind of sugary confection or sweetmeat, with lukewarm milk that clogged his throat with phlegm. Never were there meats from which he might derive sustenance, nor ales in which he might drown his pain. Only sickening chocolates, dry crumbling biscuits, white rock candy mints, striped sanguine red, bent into crooks like shepherds used. Did they know his sin? Did they taunt him purposely with symbols of a past he could no longer resolve? He forced himself to gorge each so-called meal completely, for it was all he would get to sustain him until the next cycle of penance. Aggressively relaxing, we are reading Nicolas Cage from Strange Imaginings. And we're almost through it because it's a very short story. The night lasted until Nicholas had performed his ritual at the bedside of the final child. None saw him and none forgave. They loved the old sinner far too much, and he despised the entire ignorant lot of them. As the sun was finally allowed to rise, Nicholas was carried back to the cold, dark lands of the impossibly far north. The awaiting gnomes leapt in frenzy and received him with fierce assault. Their knobby hands roughly clutched at him and pulled his weary, bloated body from the sleigh. They stripped him of his cloak, and Nicholas was naked once again to the elements. Free of their bridles, the stags scattered in 8 different directions. Back through the tunnels they paraded him, back through the twisting, turning maze until, once again, they reached the opening to Nicolas Cage. The door closed behind him, with the slow, shrill shriek of ice on ice, and the glacial walls began to emanate once more with the light of the new morning. Nicholas turned and faced the counting wall as the gnomes retreated to the warrens where they lived and worked. When he was certain they were gone, he felt numbly for his shrunken member, retracted now beneath his swollen girth. Finding it, he released a stream of urine against the counting wall, obliterating the 303 score and more marks in a bilious streaming hiss. The wall refroze quickly into greenish-yellow surface. Nicholas pulled the tooth from its hollow in his gums and scraped it up and down into the fouled ice until it left a single vertical mark. So that was a short story that came to me one night and just kind of kept me awake the entire time until morning, and I got up and had to write it in a frenzy. The afterword on this is while participating in the Zoetrope Online Writers Workshop in the 1990s, one of the discussion threads turned toward actor Nicolas Cage. It went on for some time until someone finally asked, what does Nicolas Cage have to do with the stories we work on here? It would be different if there was a story we were editing actually titled Nicolas Cage. And that night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling as this story came together in my head. The next morning I typed it directly into the submission page, bypassing any word processing. I added an H and an apostrophe. It's very rare that a story is an Athena emerging fully formed from the brow. Usually they're Galateas needing to be carefully and painstakingly chipped out of the granite. That was a little bit too flowery, but that is kind of sort of what happened. So it is open mic night, and let's go ahead and change that banner to reflect that. We are here so that anyone who wants to go and promote their comic stuff, their artwork, their books, their music, if you're making something, come in here and tell us what it is. We'd be happy to assist you with that. And I know there's a couple of other open mics going on right now, so this is apparently a new popular concept. Peter Samedi's been doing it with Alterna. I know that Tug has got an open mic on his stream right now. I don't know what that one's for yet. I might go check him out when we're all done here. But the last open mic we had some pretty good success with. We had 3 different people show up, and we were here for over an hour. So what else might I do? Well, people catch the replay on here. I'll let you know that we do have nice little things we do give away. We have these holographic stickers here. It's about 3 inches in diameter. Oh, let's see if I can get it lined up. Yay, look at that. Oh, that's a camera trick. Look at that. Never thought of that. These are little holo stickers that just have the Critical Blast logo on it. If you want one, DM us on Twitter at Critical Blast. Just let us know, hey, send me one of them stickers. Let me know where you want it. We'll pop it in the mail and get it out your way. Be very, very happy to do that. So we just read from Strange Imaginings. That's one of the very first titles that came out from Critical Blast Publishing. We're still kind of feeling our way around how to do that. We've gotten much better. We now have Gods and Services, which has been on Amazon for a while. This is an anthology of different people's works. We edited this and put out a call for submissions. Stories about gods who are out of work. Yeah, thanks, Sci-Fi For Me TV. We know Tug's running a general open mic tonight. See, he's stealing my audience. I'm sure that's what it is. Absolutely sure. Tug's scared of my audience. No. He fears the Critical Blast. Him and his 80,000 subscribers and our 963. Yes, we're 47 subscribers away from reaching that magical 1,000 mark. For those of you who are wanting to click on the super chat button by instinct and just can't do it, we're getting there. We're relying on you, and we know we're relying on you, so we're trying to bring you content that will bring you here. The last book that came out from Critical Blast Publishing, see, we're getting better. We got a hardcover here. This is Bulletproof Origins. It is by Stephen J. Mitchell, and it is a young adult superhero novel. So it's not going to be a graphic novel. It's going to be a novel. It follows a 16-year-old kid who wakes up and finds out that he's bulletproof. Now, he lives in a world of superheroes, but they're not running all over the place. They're just, this acknowledgement that they exist in this world. And he decides, well, if I'm going to be bulletproof, I'm going to be one. Problem is he's got some focus issues. He kind of has the attention span of a ferret on pixie sticks. So his friends have to keep him on track, which is a challenge because there are some terrorists who found out that he's bulletproof and that he's a kid, and they'd really like to know how to be bulletproof too, so that they could, have reusable terrorists. If you go into a place with a bomb on your back and you can walk out and do it again, well, that's a good thing for them. So they're very keen on getting that secret. It's a very fun book. It's kind of like, it reminds me of Spider-Man because there's a lot of that banter between him and his friends. There's a lot of humor in the book. There's definitely some action, and there's a lot of serious drama, but it's very classic comic book friendly if you like the Silver Age stuff. And who doesn't like the Silver Age stuff? And then finally, we have a book coming out in July And let me just see if I can't pull the cover up on that for you here. We'll see if I can get all the gerbils on the laptop to wake up and start running. So far, it's been a good night with the laptop. Yesterday was when we had the LCS guys at the round table on. The box was just choking, and now it's not quite so bad. Come on, graphics player. Open where I want you. Oh, not responding. Well, okay, maybe I spoke too soon. All right, here we go. Go to the desktop. Find the book, The Devil You Know, which is sort of a, I guess, a bookend piece to Gods and Services, except that in Gods and Services we had multiple gods, and in The Devil You Know we have just one devil. Right, okay, so let's see if we can share that screen. Application window. There we go. Well, we are trying to bring it up. It's big black screen, but it'll get there. There we go. Okay, well, it's showing up on one screen. There we go. Joe, I'm going to bring your thing down there for a second. So that's the cover, the wraparound cover for The Devil You Know. I edited this. I did not write anything in it, so you are saved from having to read anything as twisted or tangled as Nicolas Cage just was. So we're very looking forward to this. This is going to be coming from Ingram. Pre-sale date is going to be June 15th, and we're going to have a big open mic night with the authors, bringing them in for a launch party. That'll be fun. So you get to meet everybody who participated in that storytelling. Yeah, I do agree, Joseph. The Silver Age was the best for shows and films. And yeah, Disney was good. I'm thinking more along the lines of DC. I've always been a DC guy. I don't know why. Growing up reading comics, I would read the Marvel comics, but I felt different reading the Marvel comics than I did reading the DC comics. I was more excited around the DC stuff, and the Marvel stuff was just like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was a kid and they were writing to an older audience, to a more teenage audience, and it was going over my head. So, Cross Comics, hello, welcome to the stream. We were kind of hoping that we would have some people to promote here other than ourselves tonight, but I will continue to shill everything we've got and just talk about what you guys want to talk about until such time as somebody jumps in that open stream that is out there on Twitter. So if you've got a project you want to get in on, feel free to hit our tweet, follow the link. It will bring you right into the stream. We'll bring you on into the show. This old faded shirt looked a lot better before 1,000 washes. But if you are interested in a Ask Me About My Comicsgate Agenda shirt, that's also something that I believe that if that's not in the link below in the description, you can go to criticalblast.com and just hit the store link, and that will take you to our TeePublic site where you can get this shirt, as well as the Fix This Now, the Rusty Chainsaw, and In a Cocaine Heartbeat designs. So those are just some of the shirts we got out there. I wish the guys at WB would slow down and recognize the value of taking their time to get the feeling of DC right in their visual media. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like the films, they definitely do like to darken it up a bit. I was at a convention. We were talking about the difference between the DC and the Marvel movies, where DC was dominating television, but Marvel was dominating the theaters. And it does seem like the people at Warner Brothers are like, yes, we're going to do a Superman film, but we want to darken the colors of the suit, and we've got to make it more realistic and gritty because he's an alien. He's going to feel alone. He's not going to know how to relate to people. He's going to be an oddball, and he can kill people because he's so strong. And it was like Marvel's just, we got a raccoon with a machine gun. So it's not that hard, folks, to just do comic movies. Hey, sci-fi for me. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, RJ, and there is something to be said
I can
for the
see
raccoon.
you. I can't hear you.
Okay, I've got everything on my end. 1, 2, 3.
No
1, 2,
sound
3.
yet. Make sure it's not just me. I do have my volume up all the way.
Okay, because I've got everything.
Chat, can you hear him?
Should be working here. Can anyone hear me?
Might have to try it again.
All right. Let's see.
We'll get him back. I didn't remove you from the stream, but it seems to have removed you. Oh, you probably removed yourself from the stream.
Okay, let's try that.
And I heard something.
There it is. Yes, maybe.
Yes.
Ah, there we go.
We are here.
We are here. Yeah, I was saying earlier, there is something to be said for a raccoon with a machine gun. There is one of the problems that I saw from the very beginning for the DC movies is that they tried to take a shortcut. They tried to skip ahead, and you had all of these movies building up to Avengers. DC just wanted to have the Avengers movie without all the solo stuff, and that was their first mistake. I'm not too keen on Zack Snyder's take on things, but it's at least, he's got some consistency but over through all of the different films that he's made with that universe. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the Snyder Cut looks like when that comes out.
Oh, I'll be watching for it. You can jump right into a team book. X-Men certainly did it, but X-Men wasn't really built on a team of individual heroes either.
Right. X-Men was always X-Men from the very beginning. So you always started with the group from the get-go. But, if you have a team that's made up of recognizable solo heroes like the Justice League, then it's almost critical that you have those solo films first. Like we've seen with Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and now, we had Man of Steel, we get the Batman movie, then you do Justice League.
Right.
And then the whole Batman versus Superman thing, that's got to be earned. You have to earn that. That story took place after Superman and Batman had known each other for 30 plus years. And, that fight means something. It's got a lot of emotional weight to it that you don't get when it's just your first movie and they just met.
Sure.
So, I don't know. And hopefully they can.
Batman for a while, so we lost a lot of history.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do some course correction there, and we'll see what happens. But it is what it is.
Done was try to do a Justice League movie, and you could jump right into it because let's face it, Avengers was using Marvel's D-list heroes that needed some sort of an origin story behind them. Your general audience of normies, they know who Batman is, they know who Superman is, they know who Wonder Woman is. So, those three, you wouldn't really need the origin movie on them, and you could backfill a little bit of information on Green Lantern and Flash if you needed to. But do a Justice League movie, live action, but like Justice League Unlimited. Give it the more optimistic tone, give it the more over-the-top villain, throw it in real life. And for, an example of that, I would point to this week's debut of Stargirl. As something that's very family-friendly, superheroic, without sacrificing any of the details of the DC history. Were we able to see it?
I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen a lot of positive comments about it, and I think one of the reasons why you get that tone there is because Jeff Johns is involved, and it's that's his take on all of that character's world. So you get a little bit more of the creator integrity that you might not otherwise get if you've got somebody who doesn't, somebody like say like a Ryan Johnson with Star Wars. You don't have somebody is in charge making something they don't understand. It's like Sam Witwer said, he didn't do his homework. And if you've got somebody who makes a DC show who hasn't done his homework, then you end up with something like, well, I hate to say Man of Steel, but Man of Steel was, as much as people want to say it's a deconstruction of Superman, I was always waiting for Superman to show up in that movie. There was a lot of stuff that Snyder got wrong with the character, just at the core of the character. So your mileage may vary on that one, but
I've not been happy with any Superman movie after the first one, because Warner Brothers has a problem of writing by committee.
Yeah.
And my theory on committees is that, none of us is as dumb as all of us. So, Joe, welcome to the stream, man.
Yeah, we were all basically talking about the same thing in different formats, and I'm like, should I jump on? And I should jump on. I should come hang out. But I also didn't want to take away Sci-Fi's thunder, because I agree with everything he's postulated so far. Hello, it's wonderful to meet you.
Good to meet you.
And I also agree with what you just said as well, that Warner Brothers has a propensity to make decisions by committee, and of course committee is just doesn't work well unless it's well structured, and of course that's rarely the case. Because what I find with the DC films specifically, this span of DC films, because I will freely admit that when I was a kid, I actually liked Superman 2 and didn't know enough about why Superman 3 was bad because I was a kid seeing it on TV. But one of the things that there's this pernicious problem in Hollywood right now. It's not enough to make some money. If some money is making back your investment and profiting, you need all the money. And like Warner Brothers DC knows that they're behind the gun to catch up on this cinematic universe concept. That they're the Johnny come lately, right? So for my brain, it's like the reason they had to go immediately for Justice League was because it's like, we need an Avengers film now so we can directly compete with the mouse rather than building the mythic arc.
Well, I think part of it too is the idea of the $1 billion movie. They see that Avengers is making $1 billion and they want a piece of that action. And it's, these big Hollywood blockbuster action, tentpole films are making a lot of money at the box office, but how much profit are they actually making? Because when you factor in the expenses of making the film, plus all of the the distribution and advertising, marketing and advertising expenses, the theaters get their cut, the actors get their points on the back end, all of these different things that factor into that. Even if it's making $1 billion, and we saw this with the Star Wars movies, they could be making $1 billion, but not very much in the way of profit. So the performance has to be measured on how much money they get to keep, not necessarily what they make at the box office. And when DC sees this $1 billion thing and they want that, they want to jump right to that without ramping up to it. And that, I think they shot themselves in the foot with that, jumping straight from Superman to Justice League. But I also think that going from Man of Steel to Batman versus Superman was happenstance. I don't think that was the original plan. We've heard the stories.
Absolutely was not.
Yeah, because we've heard, Snyder, you say, well, what if we throw Batman in? And DC has had this problem for a number of years in the print stuff as well. I make the joke now with more Batman. That's their marketing shtick. It's anything now with more Batman, and they always think that Batman is the thing that's going to sell. Yeah, we see when New 52 happened, and then they did Rebirth, all of these different things. What's the first titles that get the crossover, the big event, is Batman.
Well,
You know?
I can't blame their logic, because like you get the same thing with Marvel, where you just add Wolverine and you now sell a dozen more books.
Sure.
I was going to say the same thing. He's Wolverine.
Well, there's a reason why Wolverine and Batman were merged together in the Amalgam comics, because they're essentially kind of similar in the tone of that character. So
this is why I make this argument that not only have we seen this sort of behavior before, because at one time the studio system was this huge monolith, and you had vast epics, and everyone knows their names, and Cecil B. DeMille and Cleopatra, and they're all amazing, and Ben-Hur. And that system utterly collapsed. And some guys you might have heard of, named Steven Spielberg and Scorsese and George Lucas, came out, and they were the Young Turks making some amazing new films like Star Wars, which were not seen as good investments at the time. And now, what's happening? Hollywood's conglomerating again, and it's building up towards collapse again. This also, I do not know what that popping is on my mic. This also coincides with this problem over at the DC realm, where they like Superman. I don't actually believe that anyone currently working on Superman, and I don't read enough Superman to say this, so this is purely conjecture and opinion, is actually like enthusiastic to make a Superman story, to actually innovate the Man of Steel in a creative fashion. They only do stories insofar as something somebody else has said about Superman, because every time there's a Superman movie, every single time there's a Superman movie, going back to Christopher Reeve, people are like, and it's a Jesus metaphor. Well, once, maybe, but that's not the only thing Superman is.
Right.
And to force that in every time with an increasingly large anvil undermines the quality of that image.
And to be honest, he was developed by two Jewish guys, so he's actually a Moses symbol.
Yeah, I was about to say, because the idea of Superman being a Messiah figure, I don't think that was the original intent. I think that's an interpretation that's been pasted on after the fact, with whoever wants to make it out to be the thing. I think part of the problem with Superman, with the people that are writing Superman, the people that are making the Superman movies, is and we saw this. There was an article Scott Mendelson wrote over on Forbes talking about how, well, look at that, fans actually like Luke Skywalker, and he was apparently having this realization that there's not that much of a problem liking heroes. Luke Skywalker, Wonder Woman, Captain America. You look at Captain America and his Boy Scout routine from the 40s. And that's something that people have not understood about Superman since the Chris Reeve movies. Well, you got a little bit with Dean Cain, and Brandon Routh kind of had that, but he was really tied in with that being a major multi-million-dollar fan film. I think if Brandon Routh had been able to kind of spread out a little bit more and not quite be such a Chris Reeve imitation, I think he would have done a lot better, but he needed to have better material. And part of that is you've got to understand who Superman is at his core. He's an adopted kid from the Midwest. He's not an alien. Wonder Woman's the alien. Superman grew up in the Midwest to parents that loved him, that stayed married until they died, that worked for themselves. Jonathan Kent was self-employed. And all of these things that make the core of the character, that's all missing from all of the modern interpretations.
Well,
And
you
it's
mentioned. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
You mentioned Zack Snyder. I'm a huge Stone Age superhero fan, and I say Stone Age in the sense that I like Doc Savage and The Shadow and Conan and all of these things that are actually older than Golden Age.
Mm.
And that means I'm also passingly familiar with some comics history. I like the book Gladiator, which is to some. I'm sorry, what?
Philip Wiley.
Yeah, to some people that is said to be the proto-Superman, the template on which the original Superman was built, and then there's the Kryptonian origin was added on to avoid a lawsuit. That is one argument. I'm not saying it's true, but what I am saying is that you can have a Superman who is a existentialist. You can have an existential Superman story. I don't know if you can have an objectivist Superman story, because Superman conceptually is in opposition to objectivism. Yep. Because for Superman, you do good because good is the right thing to do, innately. He doesn't question it. It's not a question of, I have faith that good is right. It's not a question of right is right because it's right. It's literally, he doesn't even think about it. He just does the right thing because Superman is good.
There is right and there is wrong, and the distinction is not difficult to make. Mark Waid, Kingdom Come.
Exactly.
Well, and not only that, but Superman has this innate optimism and faith in humanity. That whole, like when in the movie in '78, they can be a good people. They can be a strong people. They can be a successful people. They can be an advanced. They can do all of these things. If they want to, they have to have somebody to give them an example and the role model. And you can't be a role model by being a nihilist.
The irony to me is that as far as Man of Steel goes, I was never upset about spoilers for Man of Steel for Superman killing Zod, because it's a movie. You got to kill the bad guy. I never had a problem with the level of destruction in Metropolis, because sure, it's stupid and it's dumb, but it's a movie. I never had a problem with the, we're making a 9/11 parable. Sure you are, Guy. I believe it. No, what I think kills that movie, what I think tears at its soul and ruins it and says, this is not Superman. Not even this isn't your old man Superman. This is never Superman. Is that they did the personal attack on the moral underpinning of Superman. Yeah. They misrepresented Ma and Pa Kent, who are not just salt of the earth humans, they're salt of the earth Americans, the fundamentals from whence Superman grows. Superman didn't know who Jor-El was. He only understands the Kryptonians in like the vaguest sense of a history book tells me what they're like. He knows Ma and Pa Kent. They're the people that are like, you have a responsibility to people.
Yep.
And when you've got Pa Kent saying you can't do right because you're not allowed to be a god, but by his useless sacrifice, because he's going to walk into the tornado to prove a point. And then you have Ma Kent, this haggard old lady, standing there going, you don't owe those people anything. No, Superman owes, he might not owe everyone everything, but he owes it to himself. To do the right thing, because he'd have to look in the mirror and say, I could have done something and I didn't.
Well, and you go back to, all those powers and I couldn't save him. That whole thing about, Jonathan having the heart attack and Clark not being able to do anything about it, that humbles him. And he realizes that there are limits to what he can do. And he does what he can, but he knows that it's never always going to be enough.
Well, that's the thing, is that free statement, I'm not a very big Superman fan, but through my trials and tribulations and my wanderings, I got a book that was a adjacent book to Death of Superman. It's a big black cover. It's got a Superman's outline reaching forward. It's about Pa Kent having a heart attack because he just found out that his son is dead, right? Mm-hmm. And he's in the hospital, and they're working on him in the surgery. And the actual story is Pa Kent going on a near-death experience searching for Superman, trying to help Superman, even though he can't help his son. His son's hundreds of miles away. But somehow, in his delusional state, because it's a superhero realm and, death and life are complicated metaphysical elements, he actually does reach out to Superman's soul. And he does say to Superman that we gave you Clark Kent. Clark Kent is a guise. You can't just die. You're more than Clark Kent. You're more than what we gave you. You are Superman. You are the last of the Krypton. You have a responsibility to your legacy to live because you're not one of us. And they can only survive together. At the end of that comic, Superman and Pa Kent dive into the darkness, into the light. They take the big leap of faith together because neither of them is strong enough to return to the land of the living alone. And I mean, that's quintessential Superman. It gives me that warm feeling.
Although I like John Byrne's take on it when they revamped after Crisis on Infinite Earths and they relaunched the books. John Byrne's 6-part Man of Steel. I like the idea of Superman being the disguise almost because it grounds Clark in a way that reinforces his identity as living among the humans. He doesn't see himself as an outsider. It's one of those things where I can be Clark, but when I have to go save the world, I can put this costume on and nobody knows it's me. Yeah. It's opposite of Batman. Whereas, with Batman and Bruce Wayne is the disguise. Batman is the character. Batman's the reality. Bruce Wayne's the disguise. And Wonder Woman, Diana, just depending on who's writing her, doesn't have a disguise. I mean, she's the ultimate outsider out of the three. But I like the idea of Clark being the base and Superman being the costume.
Yeah, Clark is who I am. Superman's what I do.
Yeah.
See, I'm the silly kind of person that it's not that I don't want to read Superman stories. Like, I wouldn't be happy with a Superman story, but I would actually love to see more fiction in the modern era today that is Clark Kent reporter doing reporter things. Because I actually like the idea, as silly as it sounds, that Clark Kent is like Deep Throat, that he's trying to use the media to fight the social war against ills that he otherwise would not find out about as Superman, because even though Superman has super hearing and can hear everything, he's not tapped into networks and machines, and he is the one man, but through his job as a reporter, which he's apparently good at.
Is he good at being a reporter, or is he just good at hearing everything and going where he can go that no one else can, and then just writing it down?
Well, I think that's why he and Lois Lane
became a reporter.
Yeah.
He became a reporter because back in the day, that was where the teletype machines would say, there's a crime being committed right here. The bank's being held up. And he would get firsthand notice of things to go do as Superman. And then he'd come back and write up Superman, stop the bank robbery.
Well, I suppose
I think that still works because, you have, we got more of Clark being a reporter in the Lois and Clark TV series, which is not the comic book, but it took more of an approach of Clark being Clark rather than Superman being Clark. And so, I think that Clark and Lois as a reporting team has always been a pretty good bet in terms of what kinds of stories you tell. And I think it still works even in this day and age where you've got the internet and you've got all of these alerts coming in and whatever, the teletypes are gone, but all the news still comes into the hub there in the city room, and Clark can see it and he can go dive into the janitor's closet and out the window like he always does. And then Lois gets the scoop because, well, she's married to the guy. So it kind of works.
Well, I think
Am I the only guy who misses Superman, or rather who misses Clark Kent, news anchor at WGBS?
WGBS, yeah. Oh, I remember those days. I still have a few of those. Wow. That's been a day and a half for a while there. That was an interesting time for Clark, I think, because now he's got to figure out how to manage his disguise on camera. Because if something happens, what do? You can't just run off. No.
It's one of those fun things. Since we're kicking around about Superman as a reporter, oddly enough, is also it opens up venues for Superman to fight things that aren't Brainiac and aren't Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
Because at the same time period that I was reading a couple of Supermen that had fallen into my lap, I got the Superboy from Post Death, right? And he fell in good with a news network that wanted to be like the next, the proto Fox News. And they were basically trying to set Superboy up into positions where they could film him doing super stuff, get the lead story, and make him an owned media property.
Mm-hmm.
The antagonist was the news outlet itself, not the corrupt super businessman Lex Luthor who wants to be president. I don't have a problem with Lex Luthor. I think Lex Luthor is great, but there's a lot more like nuance and range to the number of supervillains that you get, or the number of antagonists you get, when you give Clark Kent and Superman equal screen time in your book.
Well, not only that, but you have stuff like Intergang, which was an ongoing threat through I want to say most of the 90s. They'd pop in and out every now and again, and that's where we got what was his name? Gangbuster, yes, thank you. He came out of that, and the relationship with Cat Grant and all of this. So you're able to see a little bit of that with a threat that's not the big galactic. It's not Darkseid, it's not Luthor. They spread it out a little bit more, and I think that works.
The thing about Gangbuster, who was Jose Delgado, but before Jose Delgado was Gangbuster, do you know who Gangbuster was? Clark Kent.
Yes.
And do you know why he became Gangbuster?
Well, he had amnesia.
He had amnesia because point. He was dealing with the PTSD of actually having to have killed somebody. Because when he was in the Pocket Universe and he killed the Phantom Zone criminals with the gold kryptonite, because he knew if he left them alive, they would come to his universe. They just killed a whole planet. He couldn't deal with that, and that's something we didn't get in Man of Steel. Was the whole aftermath dealing with, I took someone's life and I did it on purpose.
Yeah, and we've talked about that over on our podcast, where if you had 30 seconds to a minute after that where he agonizes over it, that would have saved a third of that movie, probably. Not the whole thing, but it would have made that scene work better if he had felt it afterwards.
Well, as we all know, it's not just what you say, it's also what you don't say that makes or breaks a scene. I cannot remember a scene in Man of Steel where Cavill Superman actually says, Zod, we're the last of Krypton. It's just us. We don't have to do this. There's a better way. He never appeals to Zod as an equal or as a sapient being to say, I can help you. We can work together. We can cooperate. Because even if Zod is a intergalactic conqueror and a authoritarian, the reason Zod is an interesting character is because his motivations are somewhat reasonable. We do understand that he is driven to victory by the very nature of his position. So there has to be a fundamentally, distantly, somewhere down there, potentially good person in Zod, and only Superman would actually suspect it's still there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's something that like with the modern era stuff, there's a lot of this that slips through the cracks because people are going for a particular thing, not necessarily the right thing. and it causes issues down the road, because you end up with a character that's not the character that you're supposed to be putting out there, and it makes it difficult to swing back in that art, like we saw with Justice League. Joss Whedon gave us a Superman that in tone is a little bit more like actually Superman, but he's still being played by Henry Cavill, and you have no arc from Man of Steel, dark and gritty, all the way up to the Superman that we got at the end of Justice League. Yeah, he died and he came back, and okay, he's happy, but that's not enough to change his entire personality.
Yeah.
Unless Death gave him brain damage.
They keep trying to humanize Superman, and the way they humanize him is by having him make human mistakes. And that takes away from the iconicness of the character. I hated Superman Returns. Not because I didn't like Brandon Routh. I think he made a great-looking Superman. But I, from the very beginning, could not wrap my head around the idea of Superman deadbeat dad.
Yeah. The kid was too much.
This is going to sound weird, but I think it makes sense. People seem to think that the way to humanize Superman is to make him Peter Parker. And they're very different characters. You can't have Clark Kent. He can look like a buffoon because he's pretending, but you can't actually make him a buffoon.
Right. Well, and we see that in the body language. If you look at Chris Reeve's performance, especially in the first movie in 78, his entire persona changes just in the way he stands. I mean, you can see it right there after he does his little fly around with Lois, and he's standing there and he goes, "Lois, there's something I have to tell you," and then he just shrinks, and it's like there's a completely different person there now. And yeah, there's some of it in Chris Reeve's voice, but a lot of it is in the body language, is in the way he stands, the way he carries himself. And we see some of that sometimes in the comic books, depending on who's writing it. But there's none of that. You don't see any of that in the modern take in the movies.
Yeah. There's a lot that I still think they could do with Superman. One of the theories that I have, and I didn't invent it. I heard about it when I was in college, and I think it probably goes back to John Byrne or somebody else theorizing it, is that Superman doesn't have any of the powers we think he has. He thinks he has these powers because that's how they manifest, but he has actually one power and one power only, and that being that he is a solar-powered psychic. He's the most powerful psychic around. And the way that's all explained is that, his super hearing, for instance, it's not just that he can hear a bullet being fired from the other side of the city. It's that the sound of that bullet travels faster than the speed of sound to his ear, which is impossible. So he's clairaudient. He's hearing things before they happen. He's clairvoyant. He's seeing things that are out of sight. He's pyrokinetic because he can look at something and excite the molecules to be on fire. Everything being explained by some level of a psychic ability. You guys have any thoughts on any of that?
I don't buy it.
Don't buy it?
No, because there's too much physical manifestation on this stuff. If it was just psychic, it would just be convincing other people that he's done something. The fact that he's actually accomplishing things like, lifting a train or pushing a building back into place or, hitting people or any of that stuff. That to me is not a manifestation of psychic powers so much as it's his body density, because that's always been the explanation, really, is the density of his molecules is such with the solar radiation from our yellow star that makes him stronger, and at least gives you a little bit of an out in terms of the science of how a Kryptonian can fly or jump or whatever, but I don't see it being a psychic manifestation at all.
I don't have a problem. Described that with telekinesis and levitation, and in fact, he even starts to build on that in Man of Steel, and then backs off of it later issues when he's flying a mountain and he lifts it, and then he's flying it, and you read in his thought balloons, he's like, I don't know why this is, but when I fly things, they're lighter than when I'm lifting them. And then it's just this unanswered dangling plot thread that he never comes back to. And it was because he was going to get to the point that, yeah, it's levitation. And by the way, that's why I can lift this mountain by, this 3 square feet that I can grab in my hands, and the, hundreds of acres above it don't fall off of this 3 square feet that I'm holding under its own weight.
It's comic book physics.
I don't have a specific problem with the idea that Superman's one power is actually psychic phenomena, because if you posit this, then it's like, okay, so he has biokinesis. His willpower is so great that he hardens his cells to the point that they are stronger than steel. That almost works, because we know from Green Lantern that willpower is an incredibly powerful energy. I only say that, though, because it's slightly better than some of the other excuses for his powers I have seen. I particularly hated in that one Superman animated film, which I believe was based on a given comic run, where it's like, Kryptonians can perceive time. It's like...
Kryptonians rip the S off their chest and throw it like a frisbee, and it'll get bigger.
Yeah, but I'm the kind of person that I'm also very much like, no, I don't like the idea that the Flash can perceive reality in a nanosecond, and he's so super smart that you just didn't know. Because if that's true, then he has a lot to answer for all the times he didn't just win.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing with, I talked about this the other day too, where I talked about how Barry Allen was a jerk. And this was basically, I was doing a review of The Fall of the Green Arrow, when he killed Prometheus, and then had the Justice League chasing after him, and Green Lantern and Green Arrow, Green Lantern and the Flash find Green Arrow, and Barry's already returned. He's like, I never knew why Hal was your friend. I always thought you were never good enough for this job. And I'm like, God damn, I went back to the Flash books, where the Flash had killed the Reverse Flash. And my point was that when you operate at that speed, there is no last second crime of passion. Everything is premeditated, because you have plenty of time to think about what you're doing.
Right.
And so not only did he kill the Reverse Flash premeditated, as fast as it looked to all of us, the Justice League had to vote on whether or not to keep him in while he was on trial. And of the 3 that voted to keep him, 1 was Green Arrow. And Green Arrow supported him, and yet when it's time for Green Arrow to need support, Flash is just, screw you, buddy.
I mean, I like Ollie, but Ollie is a little sanctimonious.
Well, he's always been written that way, and that was the whole point of his, the success of his team up with Green Lantern back in the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams time. That run, a lot of it had to do with the fact that this is the odd couple. You have Hal Jordan, straight-laced space cop, do everything by the book. There are rules. There are procedures. There are ways we do this. These are lines we don't cross. And then you have hippie Ollie, who just wants to stick it to the man and just get it done by however he's got to get it done. And that dynamic between those two worked so well for those stories, because it creates a conflict by default. And you don't have drama without conflict. That's one of the reasons I don't like The Next Generation as much as I like Deep Space Nine, is because all of the ensemble of lead characters in The Next Generation, they all get along. In the Space Hilton, all of the conflict, all of the drama comes from outside the Enterprise. Whereas with Deep Space Nine, you have the 2 people in charge of the station who don't like each other. From the very beginning, Kira Nerys looks at Ben Sisko and says, I don't want you here. And so you have this inherent conflict and drama from the very beginning with your main characters. And that gives you a lot of different space to play in, as far as, what kind of stories you could tell. Whereas if everybody's getting along, not so much. So, and I think you could do that with Superman and Batman as well, to a point. They don't trust each other. They respect each other. They learn to like each other, and they learn to get along and accept each other's methods. But they're polar opposites in terms of how they approach what they do.
You know who I'd love to see in a miniseries teamed up together? Of course, it's a moot point now because the characters don't even exist in the same fashion they used to. But along the lines of Green Arrow and Green Lantern, Green Arrow and Hawkman. That would have been like, we're gonna take down the bad guy as soon as we're done punching each other out.
I can see that. Yeah. Well, and Hawkman's got such a, depends on which Hawkman you're talking about. I mean, he's got such a checkered history as far as who this character is. But yeah, I can see that because he's essentially space cop, same as Green Lantern is. Only he's probably more so.
The sad fact of the matter is that what we have today is people would prefer Ollie to be a punching bag and to instead have us follow the adventures of Malcolm Merlyn because he wears black and that makes him cool. And it's like, but Malcolm Merlyn's a murderous jerk face.
Well, you're talking about the TV show or the books?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a separation, but the success of the show influences the book, so the book begins to progressively reflect the show.
The problem with the show is that they're telling Batman stories with Green Arrow. We don't get Green Arrow in that show.
There's that, and they threw away the premise of superhero drama for emotional soap opera narrative because there was an appeal to it.
It's the CW. That's what you're going to get, to a certain extent anyway.
I stopped watching that when they did the duel between Ollie and Ra's al Ghul. I mean, I know it was Head of the Demon, but still. So, like, that was a good stopping point. So, for me, Ollie's dead on TV. It's sad, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. It actually got pretty good, but yeah. It's just, to me, it really felt like they wanted to do a Batman show and they didn't get the rights to Batman. So, okay, we'll take Green Arrow, but we'll tell Batman stories because everything we got in the series all came from the Batman mythology, with the exception of Felicity, who's a Firestorm character.
Well, so they could so that Fox could get Batman and could then have a Batman show that doesn't have Batman, where they crap all over Jim Gordon.
That really should have been Gotham GCPD. It really should have been. That was such a missed opportunity. So.
Now, they've never been able to get Batman for television, but at the season close of Batwoman, and we know there's going to be a second season, even if it's not Ruby Rose. Am I spoiling anything if I talk about the last 3 seconds of Batwoman's season closer? Because I'm going to do it.
Go ahead.
If you don't want to hear it, folks, log off the chat. Come back in a second.
Oh my God!
But they give a face to Hush to impersonate somebody, and thus they have to make it look like who that person is, and that person is Bruce Wayne. So we now have an actor who, even though he's Hush, he's also going to be Bruce Wayne if Bruce Wayne ever returns to Gotham City, which is the other thing I hated about Batwoman and Birds of Prey, is that Batman never abandons Gotham City. That's just not what he does. It's not in his character.
Yeah.
And when I say Birds of Prey, I'm talking about the old WB series, not the atrocity that was in the video.
Yeah.
Well, they did that in Titans as well, which that thing that I'm not watching, where for one of the series season enders, some combination, they inferred that perhaps Batman has gone off the deep end and is murderizing people so that Robin can have drama. And it's like, nobody's watching this, and nobody's going to double watch this when you try to have a Batman you can't have on screen.
Yeah, well, Bruce Wayne made several appearances in Titans season 2, played by Ian Glenn, and I wasn't buying it. This older, more effete, balding Batman. It was just like, no, I don't think so. No costume, of course, but
older and gentler works so well for George Clooney.
Yes, it did. But Titans got better. I think Jason was still being played as a dick. because Robin is not allowed to go beat up a cadre of cops, because that's just Batman would like, okay, give me the mask now. But the thing about the shows is that killing is a crime if you're the bad guy. And if you're the bad guy and you kill somebody and you get away and then you say, I had a change of heart and I've decided to be a hero now, well, okay, just don't kill anybody else anymore. And there's no justice or repercussions to any of the crimes that anybody commits.
No.
Including Arrow, including Oliver Queen, who killed a lot of people, but decided, I'm going to be a good guy now. And the law should be like, okay, but you can be a good guy when you get out of prison for all these murders you committed.
Yeah, there is something to that. I think when and we've talked about with Man of Steel with the Zack Snyder universe, his approach to setting superheroes in the real world. You do that without consequences, and then you don't have a realistic storytelling mechanism. You take that part out, and then it just becomes fantasy, because at that point there are things that, if you ignore the consequences of your actions, if there are no consequences to your actions, then what's the point of the story? What does the character learn, and where's the arc? And if you have, like with Arrow and with Man of Steel and some of these others, one thing I've liked about The Flash has always been the fact that Barry does something stupid and he's got to pay for it. And he has to earn the correction. He has to fix what he broke. And they do it too much, but there is that arc in the stories where Barry doesn't just get off scot-free by doing something dumb.
That is where Gotham and Green Arrow both fall flat. Is you present a heroic character actually doing the right thing, making the right decision, and then castigating them because the right decision wasn't heroic enough. The right decision was awful. The right decision was unfit for you. And
right.
But it's like, but everyone else around them is allowed to be complete tools and fall all over themselves. Only the hero is punished for making decisions that you personally don't believe live up to the heroic ideal. If Ollie's right, and Ollie saved lives, and Ollie somehow didn't kill anyone doing it, but he had to play something close to the chest and maybe not tell you, that's not a personal betrayal. That's an unfortunate consequence of doing business.
Well, I think that's one of the problems that I have with Harry Potter, is that because Harry Potter does almost pretty much the same thing that the villains do. He lies, he cheats, he breaks the rules, he does whatever he wants, but he gets away with it because he's the chosen one. He gets away with it because he's Dumbledore's favorite. And that's not how it's supposed to work. If you're the hero, then there's a higher standard, and you have to be held accountable for making a mistake based on that standard. And for Harry, he just gets away with whatever. Whereas you compare to Frodo, Frodo Baggins, Frodo really screws up, and he's really tempted, and he wants to hold on to that ring. And if Sam hadn't been there to take him to task and hold him to account and sit there and say, we're better than this, then who knows what would have happened.
Well, that's because J.R.R. Tolkien's a much better writer than J.K. Rowling.
Well, that goes without saying, but it should probably be said every now and again anyway, just to remind people. Yeah.
And Harry wasn't even the chosen one anyway. That was a 7-book MacGuffin.
I know. Yeah, there's an entire generation that their entire set of references are either Harry Potter or Twilight. And it just, I just roll my eyes.
Well, I mean,
so much good, better stuff out there.
Well, I mean, Well, first of all, I want to throw this out there. Sai, you threw up your Indiegogo, so I'm not trying to steal your thunder. We should probably talk about that. But on my product, I was talking with RJ the other day about the right and wrongness of what my characters do within their setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you were talking about book influences. Well, obviously, people are going to go Zorro, and I've mentioned the Scarecrow of Rami Marsh. But when I was 15 and reading Dark Savage and the Shadow for the first time, right? I also recall that summer I read the totality of Robin Hood, the original Robin Hood, not like a reprint from a very old book. Right. And my absolute favorite book, I actually say what my favorite book is, Treasure Island. I have read Treasure Island like 4 times in my life. I know it by heart, and I still love to pick it up and read it. And there are heroes and villains there, and there's questionable morality and choices there, and there are people committing crimes there, and yet the adventure is more important than the rightness or wrongness of the actions. You still hope the good guys win, even though they might do something that's questionable in a modern context.
Right.
That's okay.
And that's one of the problems that I have with people trying to judge past works with modern day cultural mores that are not going to stay here in place another, 5, 10, 15 years from now. We're making judgments, the whole cancel culture thing, where people are sitting there going, oh, you shouldn't be reading those stories because they're, pick your selected chosen istophobe of the week. And it doesn't work to judge things that are of a different time. But also, if you want your stories to be timeless, Marvel, then you should be telling stories that don't soak in the modern day culture, whatever modern day culture that is, whether it's the 20s or the 30s or the 2000s or whenever. That's part of the problem that you're having with some of these stories that are winning Hugo Awards, that are winning Eisner Awards. They're not going to be around 5 years from now. Nobody's going to know what they are. Nobody's going to care. And that's part of the problem with these things, because moral sensibilities and cultural sensibilities change. There is still a sense of right and wrong in terms of morality plays, but they have to have universal truth behind them. And that's what a lot of people don't understand nowadays with storytelling.
Niobe Comics, welcome to the chat. We started off saying we're going to show everybody, or not, we just started talking about Superman and then movies.
Well, it is the world of comic books, right? I'm just tuning in, so I did miss half the conversation. I want to give a shout out to Tank Ferret Art, who actually retweeted you guys, which is how I found out about the show and the open mic. And I just started at Indiegogo last night, so what perfect timing.
Well,
absolutely. Yeah. So what do you got?
Well, this is my 7th campaign, my second go on Indiegogo. Predominantly, I usually do Kickstarters. I've been doing this now for 7 years. And it's my series Niobe. She's a Japanese pop star, has the ability to teleport, and finds out through the course of time that her powers are slowly killing her. Turns out that jumping through space and time is a system shock to the body, gentlemen.
I can imagine. So you got I put your link out there. Do you have any screens you want to share? Show us some artwork.
Oh, I can show you all kinds of stuff. Here, let me go on camera. I got the Corona hair going on, gentlemen. So don't mind me here. I'm also just sort of waking up. I'm getting pretty shaggy. You know what I'm saying?
And if you want to, you can hit us up on Twitter later. We can devote a whole hour to you guys. Put the whole team on.
Oh, damn. Well, I mean, it's just me. My team is scattered across the world, dudes. I got a guy in Mexico. I got a guy in Brazil. I got dudes in the States. I myself am in Canada. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But this here is one of the copies of the book.
Nice.
This is a second chance campaign. So I ran this on Kickstarter. I had a lot of people on Indiegogo say LP. We missed out on Niobe because it was on Kickstarter. We only do Indiegogo for whatever reasons.
I'm giving you full screen, so bring the art back up again.
Yeah, sure. And they're like, we want to get a hold of your book. This is just one of many covers that we have. This is actually done by R.B. White, who's worked for Zenoscope Comics and Action Lab, doing covers for Zombie Tramp and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll bring it back to Indiegogo, and we'll do a brand new set of covers. So we have Luigi Terrell, the artist of Rags. You guys familiar with Rags at all?
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, so Luigi Terrell is on board. He's done 2 covers for us. One's exclusive to Indiegogo, and the other one is a variant crossover featuring Sailor Rogowski, a.k.a. Regina from Rags, on the cover. And you guys will see that in the link. And so very excited that Brian Ball has, loaned me his character for the cover. And my character, Niobe, is actually going to appear in his book, Sailor Rogowski, which is going to drop on Patreon, I believe, September the 25th. Very cool. Exciting stuff. Cool. And then also Niobe appears on Punchline number 15, the cover, done, of course, by the great Matt Weldon and Bill Williams over there at Antarctic Press. And I believe that book is going to drop, I think Matt said like December, January, because like they're on issue 10. This is issue 15. So about 5 months or 6 months away from all that. And that's, of course, all dependent on the COVID-19 situation when stuff actually gets done and gets out there, right? So yeah, we just launched this Indiegogo. Yeah, so we just launched this Indiegogo yesterday. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of the interior artwork on the inside of the book. A lot of people who have read this book so far compare it to 80s and 90s X-Men in all the best ways possible. So if that's the type of compliments I'm getting, I'll certainly take it. Niobe is a genome, which stands for genetic anomaly, basically my world's version of mutants. And she comes underneath some heated waters here where she's defending another woman. And there's a huge protest going on outside. Kind of a reflection of our modern day world, if you will. Here, you got to check out this double page spread, boys. This was done by Samir Samael, great artist out of Brazil, by the way. Yeah. No, this is fantastic stuff. The book is actually very, very well printed. I'm going to give these guys a shout out. Comics Wellspring out of Michigan. These guys do a fantastic job. Had no problem at all putting their ad on the back of my book, man, with the job that they did. We also have, you guys familiar with Paul Green? Paul Green did a variant cover for us. Now, that's not actually on the Indiegogo because that was a Kickstarter exclusive, but we have stretch goals. People will get, anyone that backs and we meet the requirements, will get the Paul Green Ula Moss Niobe postcard. We also have the Niobe trading card. So if you're new to Niobe, and you get this trading card, basically all the vitals and what you really need to know to get started is on the back of the card. So there's that. And then we have like the hot and sexy cosplay photos from Emily here. Very nice. Very nice. Great success. So a lot going on in the world of Niobe. Very proud, though, of having Luigi Terrell from Rags come and join us for a couple of covers. That's really exciting. And the crossovers with Antarctic Presses, Rags and Punchline have literally blown me away. Matt Weldon is actually going to be doing a cover for us for our next campaign for Niobe number 2, Birthright number 2, which will be dropping probably towards the end of summer. So I'm thinking late July, early August.
Yeah, you showed the trading card there, and I'm going to take this opportunity to get on my soapbox and hammer this idea again until I get what I want.
All right, hammer it to me, man.
Everyone's doing crossovers. You mentioned how your character's crossing over onto Rags, Rags crossing over onto your covers. Here's my thought. Get 9 different crowdfunding teams to get along for more than 7 months.
Wow. You're asking a lot here. You're asking a lot.
I know. And have each of them do a card of their character, settle on a design, settle on a presentation so that everything looks uniform, and then have all 9 cards come together to make one picture. Now, what that does is if I back your project and Joe's project, and you both have a card of this set, I'm like, oh, these cards are cool. Oh, I got to get the other 6 cards. Well, who's doing these? Well, I look for them and I find them, and I'm like, and we lost Joe. Joe hated that idea.
Whoa, Joe. Joe, I didn't mean to offend you, Joe.
And they're like, well, okay, the other 6 cards are on these 6 projects. these six projects look pretty cool. I probably would not have seen these if I hadn't been looking for the other cards.
It's like the build the action figure piece by piece by buying the other action figures.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, the card
I saw
idea has
the-
been tried before on Kickstarter. There was a guy who tried to do that, not necessarily have all the characters on the same cover, but he tried to do a set of indie cards, right? So get a bunch of people to sign up and all their cards would be on indie. And it was actually a Kickstarter thing and it failed. Unfortunately, it failed, but it was a great looking collection. But what I can show you is this. This here is the cover for Punchline 15 coming out that features all sorts of characters throughout the, I would say, the Twitter community. You have Common America from Tim Lim there. You have Rags, Regina. You have the Punchline character. You have the Operator. Niobe's actually standing right behind the two girls at the arcade machine, so she's front and center. And then in the back, you have like Ben Dunn's characters from Ninja High School. You have Pineapple Man. You even have Booster Kiwi from Fanspeak and Drawn and Quartered, the fan edition. You have all kinds of people. Scalpel Zero for Tank Fair Art is in there as well. So this is going to be a great, great cover. This was a wonderful thing that Matt Walden did for the independent comic book community by including some of these characters onto his cover that, you know, is in mainstream comic books. I mean, this book you can buy in your local shop. So it's fantastic.
You said it's
I'm
got
sorry,
the
you broke up there.
character. You said it's got the Punchline character. From my understanding was that the title was Punchline, but there was no character named Punchline.
I mean, her name is Versema, I think is how you pronounce it.
Okay.
That's why I called her the
reason-
Punchline character, because I didn't want to mess up the pronunciation of her name.
Gotcha. Because the reason I asked that is, of course, that DC's got the Punchline character.
Yeah. They have like the weird clown girl that is supposed to be the replacement for Harley Quinn. Yeah.
Yes, but you know, somebody we've had on the show before and whose books I've not produced but promoted is Ted Sikora of Hero Tomorrow, who does Apama and he does Tap Dance Killer, which is a beautifully drawn book, by the way. Everyone should check out Tap Dance Killer. And one of the characters in there, chronologically appearing, is the first character named Punchline. Now, not only named Punchline, but he is a killer. He's got a clown theme, and he's basically everything that DC's Punchline is, except male instead of female. So I knew Punchline the book existed, and it did predate the character. But as far as characters go, I'm waiting to see where Hero Tomorrow and DC might come to loggerheads over things, because I know that DC will try to trademark that character to make at least an action figure out of it.
Oh,
Right.
for sure. I mean, that character is widely popular. I see her all over the place on my Facebook, you know. So, you know, people are just waiting for that Harley Quinn versus Punchline miniseries. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
Could be why her title is getting canceled. Maybe that's the next thing.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think Harley Quinn is done at issue 75, if I recall right.
Yeah.
So you're saying Harley Quinn's getting canceled?
Well, I think it's going to be a limited run. I think Nobody's right. It's going to be. I think it's ending at 75, but they're ending with digital only, is my understanding. Which means that anybody who's been collecting is kind of out of luck.
Yeah, a lot of those DC titles that are coming to an end are all being done digitally. As their finals, like the last 3 issues are all digital, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Because, like you said, if you're a collector, I have 12 long boxes behind the screen, right? If you're a collector and you buy these books and you want to have like a complete run, like some of us are yeah, exactly. There you go. Some of us are, you know, are completionists. We want it all, right? And now you're like, oh, geez, I'm missing the last 3 issues. I guess I can read them on my tablet, but I can't have them in my box. It makes no sense. But
you know, what's even more egregious than that is Marvel doing the same thing to Hawkeye, which was a limited series. It was the last issue of a limited series. So
yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, comic books right now is in a really big peril. I mean, even though Diamond's coming back and slowly shops are starting to reopen. I know my shop just reopened last week, you know, but they're only allowed like 6 in the building. You have to walk a certain way and you have to wear a mask and you gotta do all these precautions just to go in and buy a comic book. That's going to slow down business significantly. And then when you have the publishers saying, you know what, this is way too expensive for us to print, we're just going to do it digitally and we're not even going to bother shipping it. I mean, what does that say about the comic book industry in itself right now? This is a reason why that crowdfunding has really stepped up its game a lot. You know, a lot of people say the comic books are in deep trouble, but yet you have Todd McFarlane who can go on Kickstarter and make like $3 million with an action figure. You have Brian Pulido who runs Lady Death, consistently making 300 grand each outing. And those are the the top examples. But then you have you guys like Ethan who comes out with this Frog comic and blows it out of the water. And then you have like smaller guys like us who just keep pounding the pavement, man, and doing our thing, and it's exciting. I think it's a great time to crop. And I think people are looking for alternatives. And while there is this break in comic books, this is a good time to kind of check out something new and check out that alternative. That's exactly what we are. We're the alternative to everything else that you're going to find on the comic book shelf right now. Yep.
Well, it's also very unwise with regards to the decision making of the people producing print media, because as you recall, RJ, last time we were here, I was talking about the idea of applying serial numbers to our Executioner book as a production idea, so that people who are in the theoretical collector's market can say, I have first run, right?
Mm-hmm.
This event, this pandemic, this problem we're currently struggling with is a one-in-a-lifetime event. It's not going to come again. If I were a collector and I was a business who, profited off of a collector market to encourage people to buy at a at-risk period when my sales are down, I'd be like, no, we're going to put out more hard books because these are going to be the COVID run books. These are COVID era. This will not come again. We will sign these. We will, shill these hard so that you buy them, because then the collector can say, well, you have a reprint. I have pandemic era.
I have a brilliant idea to market it as COVID era books. Let's put like a big yellow stamp on the book.
All right, guys. Hate to interrupt, but I'm going to have to bail out. I've got to engineer a live stream myself here in not too long, but I appreciate the time. Thanks, RJ. We will do it again, definitely.
Appreciate it. Anytime,
okay,
man.
All right. Talk to you later.
And any of you guys, if you want to get like a little bit more in depth into your own projects, Joe, you've been on here twice already in the past couple of months as Executioner gets closer. Niobe Comic, if you want to, come on and just show a lot lot more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
A night that would be just.
Well, here, let me make sure that I am following you right now.
The only reason I'm here is because I'm stalking you, because I figure I should support the people that are kind enough to help pick me up.
I started to stalk you, and then I saw that that young lady on her YouTube show rip you guys a new butthole, and I was like, oh, this is painful to watch. I can't see.
Oh, what happened there? That sounds like an interesting story.
We were invited over here at Archetype Comics. Hi, nice to meet you. To go on a show with a young lady. Give me a second. I'll pull up her name for you. She does a series called Hot Scalpings. Super similar to Red Gaze's Gauntlet, where they're going to bring you on and they're going to put you through the gauntlet to see how you do. Rosetta Allen.
I don't know the name.
And well, she's very, very new. It's brutal, but very new. She's a developing presenter on the tube, and yeah, she was pretty scathing. But we took it like champs because we've been through this before once with other people.
Sure.
Because over here at Archetype, we are very new. You have multiple successful books. We want to be where you are now.
Well, let me tell you something. I still consider myself to be very much on the ground level. While they're all successful campaigns, they're all very modest campaigns. We don't ask for a lot of money. We don't break the bank, just enough basically to print and ship the books and maybe pay back some of the money that came out of pocket to spend on artists and covers and whatnot. People don't really understand just how expensive it is to put together a comic book, but you're looking at least $3,000 on the low end, and that's if you're going black and white and you're skimping on a lot of things, and up to like $5,000 or $6,000 for us to produce an issue of Niobe now. That's including variant cover artists, the line work, the color work, the letterer, the pre-press production, and then add on all the little stretch goals that we do throughout our campaigns. I'm in Canada. The last last campaign we ran did $7,000 Canadian, which is probably about 82 cents American. You know what I mean?
I was going to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a international team, and we're pulling for 10. But we're well aware of it. It's like we're gonna break even. Profit is not necessarily a goal at this time.
Hey, listen, if you're breaking even, though, you're ahead of the game, right? There's lots of creators out there that are just trying to get the works out for the very first time, and they're in the hole. But that's a sacrifice you make when you believe in your project and you want to get it out there. The first Niobe we did, I think we only raised maybe $1,800 to $2,000, something along those lines. And I definitely, took a hit on that, but that's what got the ball rolling, though, right? That's, getting that first issue out there. And we were just like, 3 local guys from Canada, doing a local comic in our city to sell at the local con. That's all it was ever meant to be, right? But then, we started to expand, and now, I'm shipping comics to Germany, and they're going to Mexico. They're going all over the place. So it's cool. And then you just start to meet people by doing this. Like I said, to get to work with the Matt Weldon or the Brian Balls of the world, or the Paul Greens or the RB Whites, and I can name drop a few other names here, but it's all awesome. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Look, I don't know much, but all I know is I'm a metalhead, and you have an AC/DC poster in the background, so I'm down.
Put on as well.
Yeah, see, there we go. Yeah, you're down.
That's right, back in Canada.
Yeah.
I'm going more controversial with my shirt. But,
Ask me about my Comicsgate. I get asked about that all the time. I'm not Comicsgate, but I'm not opposed to Comicsgate either. I'm just a guy that makes a comic book.
That's where I am.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Ethan would ever have me on a show, though I've been on there a couple of times. Right when I first started, it's because I run on Kickstarter, right? And they don't necessarily like Kickstarter because they did your boy Zach wrong, and that's why we're on Indiegogo right now, so that those backers on Indiegogo who just refuse to use Kickstarter can at least still get a hold of the book. And so that's what we're doing. I'm never going to drop Kickstarter. That's where we started, and that's where we get most of our success. Why would I, leave a fan base over a bad business deal made with someone else? You know what I mean? Like like business wise, it doesn't make sense to me. I get people's principles and pride. But this is business,
At the very end
you can go to both.
And you can go to both. I mean, that's what I'm doing now.
At the very end of the day, though people can have strong beliefs, and that's great, and people can have strong opinions, and that's great, the politics don't matter, because I think that everybody in this space immediately in this conversation can agree that the actual goal for creators, readers, and everybody in between is making good comics and getting those comics to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all want that. We all want the industry to do well. That's the ultimate in crossing the aisle conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's my first piece of advice to people. If you're going to do this, do it start to finish. Get your book out there. Don't be one of these guys that you raise a bunch of money and then your book never gets done. Or don't be one of these guys that raises a bunch of money and your book is a year late. You know what I mean? I don't want to see another Courteous come down the road. I don't want to see another Stealing Solo where you're not ship your books right too. Don't fold them up like a magazine and huff them in the mail. Take care with this. This is your dream. This is your goal. But it also requires a lot of work. And I think when people get into comic books, they expect big money with little effort, and that's just not how it works. No,
nothing works that way. We're doing publishing. I mean, we started out as a website, which is just reviewing of entertainment material. We've branched out into this live stream world here, and if you're wanting to give us money through the super chat, folks, we appreciate you wanting to do that. Sorry that your itchy little clicker finger isn't getting to do that because we don't have 1,000 subscribers yet.
No, but you're close, man. Look at this. You're at 965. You are now 966, sir.
Awesome. 34 to go. 34 to go, and I don't even know how many hours of watch time we have, or how many we would have to
worry about your sub count first. Will you watch time is something you can fix later?
Absolutely. But we branched out into this, and then at the beginning of the stream, I talked about how we I started out reading from one of our very first publications, which was just my short stories, because, hey, let's get something out there. But then a better book, I'm saying better than my own stuff, yes, was Gods and Services, which was an anthology we put together last year, almost 2 years ago now. Short stories. We paid people, and we have some, high-name people in here. David J. Peterson from the Angst series. We have Ira Bloom, whose novel is at Simon and Schuster. No, at Scholastic. Hearts and Other Body Parts. We have John Della Rose in here, so we are
John Della Rose.
Yeah, we appreciate the writer. We separate the art from the artist, guys. That's what we do. It's what we preach.
John Della Rose, of course, Flying Sparks. People, if you do not know,
Yeah.
he's done lots of other work besides that. But that was the book that I actually backed from John.
Well, I mean, did you guys see what Alterna did recently?
What did Alterna do? I know that they're offering distribution to independent comic book publishers.
Oh, nice. No, on the YouTube, they put up a small preview of Blood Realm, like a minute and a half preview, which was actually a dramatic reading. It had like voices and everything. It sounded really neat. It's something that if you had not been exposed to their work before, like this was a good introduction to get into that comic.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded really nice. Over here at Archetype, we're working with a voice actor named, his YouTube name is Baldermort. He's a lovely English gentleman with this rich, sibilant voice. And we're having him doing some dramatic readings of some in-character narratives from our setting to kind of tide people over and encourage them to spread the word and get people excited about our book while we're running our own campaign. Because you got to keep the hype train stirring, if not moving forward.
You got to keep it moving, even when you're not currently actively crowdfunding. For 2 months, I've been talking about this project, and posting little hints and little teaser images, and the promotion never stops. Let's just put it that way. Every day, I don't think there's a day that doesn't go by where I'm not talking to somebody or posting something on some sort of media about my comic book somewhere.
You've got to keep the name out there so that no one forgets who you are. Joe, when you get off here, go back to the beginning of the stream, and you'll catch me doing a dramatic reading of my own of a creepy Christmas short story that appeared in that Strange Imaginings.
Something with an insane Nicolas Cage, as I understand it?
Yes, it's Nicolas Cage. Nicolas apostrophe as in ownership Cage. It's the cage in which Nicolas is put.
Okay.
Your future Superman, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, well, the whole deal was that 20 years ago, I was on the Zoetrope Writers Workshop, Francis Ford Coppola's online thing, and there was discussion forum, and somebody kept talking about Nicolas Cage, and there was a whole big thread. And finally, somebody said, "Why are we talking about Nicolas Cage on a writers forum? Is there a story out there called Nicolas Cage? Did he submit something?" And I went home and I laid in bed and thought, what if there was a story out there called Nicolas Cage? And I threw the apostrophe on it, and it was like I didn't go to sleep at all that night. I laid in bed. I got up the next morning. I went in early to work. I brought up the Zoetrope site, and instead of copying a Word document that I had carefully crafted over weeks and pasting it in the submission form, I started typing it right into the submission form. And it was this story. It was one of the rare times that a story comes out clean the first time, exactly the way you want it. So yeah, go back and give it a listen. This is our hardcover young adult superhero novel, Bulletproof. This is available on Amazon. It's by Stephen J. Mitchell. And it is about a young man who wakes up and finds out he's bulletproof and decides to be a superhero, but he has attention deficit problems, so his friends have to keep him on track. And if you watch our Twitter feed, you'll see the cover is in for our new anthology, which will be available July 1st, The Devil You Know, which has 20 short stories in it. So we've spent twice as much money as I planned to, but we have 20 high-quality stories from people in the horror industry and fantasy industry, all delivering stories about people's encounters with the devil and what they did and how they came out of it. So that's my shilling for the night.
There you go.
Only other shilling I got is that, I love doing this right there. If you like holographic stickers, hit us up in the DM on at Critical Blast on Twitter. Let us know where you want one. We'll throw it in an envelope and ship it out your way. It costs us nothing but a stamp. We're happy to help people out and give you stuff to help you remember us. So, guys, appreciate you being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Niobe Comics, hit me up on Twitter. We'll set you up a night because this is an ongoing Indiegogo yet right now, right? I mean, this is
just launched it yesterday.
okay. So we want to get that out there. We'll set you up some night. You can do it this weekend if you want, but whatever night's good for you, let us know.
Sure.
We'll dedicate an hour to it. Joe, always a pleasure to have you on, talk with you. We try to do open mic nights once a week. Don't know what we're going to talk about. Might be presenting a project. Might be talking about Superman.
I will try to find things to do other than stalk you.
No, that's cool. Hey, Joe, if you want to get some reading in, I'm going to give myself full screen on this one because I want you to see these things here. I think you would like something like Holy Superheroes by Greg Garrett, who I interviewed him. Of course, the more well-known one is Our Gods Wear Spandex by Christopher Knowles. Who Needs a Superhero by H. Michael Brewer, which is another one of those finding virtue, vice, and what's holy in the comics. And edited by Tom Morris, and it's an anthology, is Superheroes and Philosophy, Truth, Justice, and the Socratic Way. So those all come off my bin of not graphic novels. But I read a lot. I read a lot.
I think one of the largest misunderstandings about the comic reading community is that people who read comics are of simple mind or simple taste and only read comics. It's like, no, I know plenty of people that's like, oh yes, I read Superman, and right next to it I have the Socratic Theses and Cicero.
Yes. Somewhere over here, among Reinventing Comics and Universe and Watchmen, I have Aristotle's Poetics that I usually save for airplane reading because it makes people look at you 3 times to figure out what's he reading.
One of these days, I've been planning to get a webcam. If I'm here and everybody's around, I will do what you do. I will ominously rotate to the right and just show my bookcase, which has a mountain of things ranging from oh man, I've got collected Shelley, and I've got Stalking the Wild Pendulum, which is by a Russian mathematician. Just a mountain of weird stuff.
Once you get into the live streams and you start buying the cameras and the equipment, it becomes an addiction, man. I ended up buying the mic and mic arm and the green screen and the HD cam, and then I got this Elgato Stream Deck down there and a capture card. It's encompassed my life, dude.
Really?
Oh yeah.
See, I'm getting by with the free Streamlabs right now and my iPhone. I'm actually a guest on my own show because if I try to use the host camera, it tears the laptop up.
No, I end up buying like a whole gaming piece because I do a lot of game streams as well, right? So I end up buying a whole game PC, and it's probably at least $1,000 worth of gear here for live stream. 2 monitor setup and the whole 9, man.
Well, I'm gonna have another book review coming up soon. I've been doing a lot of older graphic novel reviews, so sometime later next week we'll be revisiting Identity Crisis, which I really liked, but a lot of people didn't. So, all right, guys, gonna let you go. Appreciate you coming by, and like I said, hit us up. We'll talk again.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invite, and yeah, I'll hit you up on Facebook I'm so used to Facebook, on Twitter, and we'll get things rolling.
I'll tell you what, we are at Critical Blast on Twitter. We are at Critical Blast on Facebook. We are at Critical Blast on Instagram. So if you want to hit any of those things just to say, hey, here we are, let's set up a night, you go where you're comfortable, man.
Yeah, and for me, it's Niobe Comic on Twitter and Rebel Comics and Gaming on YouTube.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, guys. We're done.
Thank you, sir.